So did you all do your board meeting last night in person for the first time?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe 15 people out there.
Mm-hmm.
All of us here, and about 20.
That's good.
We are recording.
What's that?
We are recording.
We're recording. Okay. We'll give it a few more minutes. Krista, how did you feel after yours?
She didn't
I
get
felt
one.
bad because I didn't get one.
Yeah. So you felt just fine.
I hate saying that though. I
She's a
hate telling
resistor.
people that. I feel awful telling people that.
Well, from my perspective, it's a personal decision.
Yeah.
It's none of my business, but I tell you, since I had had it before, it pretty much knocked me out the first shot.
Mm-hmm.
I was tired.
Yeah. No, I absolutely respect everyone's decision.
Yeah, yeah. And we've been going into the office every day, and I mean it's, you know.
Seems like we're
And
on the
my
up
son's
and up,
been
though.
going to school every day ever since Ayla Country Day. I mean, of course they've got 10 children in the grade, so you can kind of
Really
manage
spread
that.
it out.
Yeah. Yeah, you can spread out, you can manage it. They did adjust the classes so that they have a section A and a section B, and they rotate the sections in each grade so that there was still a little complication with that.
Oh, that's so sad though.
I know,
It
it's
stinks
hard.
They have to do that.
It's hard. Well, next year, beginning of next year, hopefully we'll be not having to have this discussion any further. Okay, I don't know what time, is that clock?
Yeah, that's
Slow?
wrong. Yeah.
Okay, well,
It's 7. Yeah,
good,
that
let's
was
do it. Greetings, everyone. My name is Janie Rhodes. Thank you for attending. We're happy that this is our first meeting where we've been in person for a long, long time. So this is wonderful to have everybody. This meeting is we're reconvening our meeting from April 12th, which was a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. So we recessed the meeting and we are reconvening this evening. For that reason, we already had our public comment period at that April 12th meeting. What we're going to be doing this evening is we're going to be reviewing the draft ordinance that some of you all may be familiar with. Planning commissioners, we should have our notebooks, and I think we'll go ahead and start. Ms. Cole, will you take the roll, please?
Ms. Height? Here. Mr. Breeden?
Here.
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Greenwood?
Here.
Chairman Rhodes?
Here.
Thank you.
And so what I would propose, just for efficiency, is at our last joint session, the Berkeley group, the consultant, went over the surveys that were distributed to the community. Over 500 were completed and came back, both mail, dropped off. I think there were some that were emailed as well as had summaries of meetings that were held with stakeholder groups. There were 4 stakeholder groups. So the Berkeley group went over 7 or 8 topics in their agenda at our April 12th meeting, which was a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. We have copies of those recommendations, I think, in our materials this evening. And my recommendation to the planning commissioners would be that we go through Berkeley's recommendations one by one, if you all are open to that, and discuss them, talk about them. So let me just, for clarity of setting the stage for those who are in attendance, the recommendations relate to lot sizes and setbacks and other changes with respect to the AC district, the agricultural district, accessory dwellings, short-term business rentals, event venues, site plan requirements, and family subdivisions. I believe that may be it. So my thought is we go through each in order. And so I'm going to pull mine right now. Also, Sherry, Ms. Graham sent additional information just recently that I think either you or the Berkeley group had compiled relating some additional comments as it pertains to the ordinance. Is that correct?
That was Berkeley.
Okay. So we have those materials as well, and I think that may be pertinent to our discussion.
Was that sent today, Madam Chair?
No, this was sent a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And so this, if you remember, there was a letter in there
Right,
pertaining to, yes, so no additional materials.
Right.
So that is kind of setting the stage. The first item that the Berkeley group discussed what related to the lot size setbacks and other provisions and changes to the ordinance. And so there were comments relating to that. So tell me, fellow commissioners, when you have your Berkeley group recommendations in front of you. And attached were copies of the actual survey summary and the stakeholder summary as well. So the changes are as follows. And if I may, what I think I'm going to do is read out the proposed changes and then Berkeley Group's recommendations, and then we can talk about it. Do you all have what you need in front of you? Okay. The overview is the minimum lot size is proposed to increase from 5 acres to 10 acres. Lot size is proposed to increase from 200 feet to 500 feet. The setbacks from 360 and other primary roads is proposed to increase from 75 to 100. Street frontage on the primary roads proposed to increase from 400 feet to 500 feet, and the setbacks from the secondary roads is proposed to increase from 50 feet to 75 feet. The purpose and intent, the last comprehensive plan survey indicated that 61% of the respondents felt that the most important thing about living in King William was the rural nature. Tranquility and farming and agriculture were also in the top 4. We'll discuss that in a little more detail. And increasing the minimum lot size and minimum setbacks in the agricultural district is a common practice to preserve the rural landscape, discourage subdivision of productive land, and create more open space between development. So that is kind of sets the stage. The recommendation of Berkeley Group was given stakeholder input, and survey response was less than 50% supporting the lot size change. The recommendation from Berkeley was to return the lot size, lot depth, road frontage standards to existing standards. Given public support for setback standards, the recommendation was to maintain proposed increased setback standards that I just read out, and then continue community engagement on the issue through the ongoing comprehensive plan update, and consider identifying areas on the future land use map and in the comprehensive plan that should be preserved as agricultural areas. So I've just read out to you all kind of a summary. I think this is one of the more, one of the topics that generated the most response. So I think this was probably worth reading. And so what I'd like to do is open it up for discussion with my fellow planning commissioners on those recommendations.
Madam Chairman, if I may,
You may.
and I have a little bit to read here, but if you would permit me, I'll go ahead and read what I've got. And this is in response to what you just said and actually repeat some of it. This is for the increase in lot size from 5 acres to 10 acres and lot width and depth standards. Berkeley Group purpose and intent indicates 61% of respondents felt the most important thing about living in King William County was the rural nature of the county, and that the tranquility, forestry, and agriculture were listed in the top 4 of importance. They also stated that increasing lot size and minimum setback in agricultural districts is a common practice to preserve the rural landscape, discourage subdivision of productive land, and create more open space between development. The stakeholder comments were, does not preserve agriculture, increases value of small lots and limits affordable housing, is harmful to low income and first-time home buyers. This is my response to that. Stakeholder comments are A, in direct conflict with the stated purpose in the above purpose intent. B, do not take into account other opportunities to provide affordable housing on small lots and reduce home size in major subdivision. And C, does not consider opportunities for development of smaller homes in our zoning district where they can develop up to 24 homes without having water or sewer. They would still have to have paved roads. And those homes in those districts could, if we're looking for low-cost housing, that could be 2 to 3 bedroom homes with 12 to 1,500 acres, or 12 to 1,500 square feet. The survey response, when adjusted to the number out of 520 respondents that chose to respond to specific questions on lot size, 53% were in agreement with raising the minimum lot size to 10 acres. And that 53, what we had in there was 46% what they showed, but that 46% was based on 520 people, but only, I think it was 400 and, I got the figure down here someplace, but well less than 500 people responded. So when you break it down to the actual people that responded, then the response for 5 acre lots was well over 50%. My comment again, the Berkeley Group assigned too much weight to the stakeholder groups, which consisted of only 11 individuals in 4 groups. And one of those groups, tourism, did not express a concern with lot size, but offered many options for residential development. These appeared to be an overlap of stakeholder sizes in 3 of the groups. The Berkeley Group also stated that a survey response to the question on lot size was less than 50% and used that as a reason to favor the stakeholder groups. Actually, when the number of respondents to the question is adjusted to reflect those who actually responded to the question, 241 people, or 53.79% agreed with the increase in lot size, while 207 or 46.2% disagreed. Also, a clear majority of those responding to questions on land use and preserving the rural open space in the county agreed with policies and ordinances to strengthen ordinances that meet those goals. And that also policies that, well, I'll leave that out for now. Recommendations, it is my opinion, based on citizen responses and a clear desire to retain the rural atmosphere so that many citizens have moved to the King William to enjoy. We should increase the minimum lot size in the AC district to 10 acres. And as we develop the comprehensive plan, we should review and determine the areas of the county where residential development would be acceptable and limits on residential development that threaten maintenance of open space, farming and forestry and historic preservation. Does anybody want to respond? I've got a little bit more that has to do with the frontage width, the lot depths and so forth. But does anybody want to respond to what I have provided so far?
I know we all are going to want to speak at some point, so it's now the time.
I was just wanting to know if anybody
Sure.
wants to directly respond to those comments. If not, I'll go ahead with the lot depth and what I have said is in the event that the final decision is to keep the minimum lot size at 5 acres, then I would recommend the following minimum lot width, lot depth, and setbacks. The minimum lot frontage on the primary system would be 400 feet for AC, 300 feet for rural residential, and 200 feet for R1. Secondary lot frontage would be 300 feet for RR, 200 feet for R1, and 150 feet for R, and R1 would be 150 feet. Subdivision streets, AC would be 150 feet, rural residential 150 feet, and R1 would be 100 feet. The reason for the change in what we had previously recommended for the lot frontage from 500 feet to 400 feet is that if you look at a 5 acre lot, you're looking at about 257,000 square feet. If you divide that by 500 feet frontage, then the depth of the lot would be only 430 feet. So it doesn't give a lot of wiggle room for design or subdivision concept for the shape of the lots. So by reducing it 400 feet, then the developer can have at least 530-foot depth. And if they want to widen it further, then they would have less depth, but it gives them more options to work with. On the minimum setback in the primary AC, 100 feet. Secondary AC, also 100 feet. Or in the primary rural residential, 75 feet. R1, 75 feet. On the secondary, 100 feet. Rural residential, 50 feet. R1, 40 feet. Subdivision in the AC, 50 feet. Rural residential, 50. And R1, 40. Comment I had on lot frontage and lot depth reduces to 400 feet, what I just went over. But also I've said in there that it is recommended that a 100-foot setback also applies to the rural residential roads. Since the citizens have spoken out that they want to keep the areas rural, if we have these developments in the rural area, the greater setback on the house frontage to 100 feet would provide a more open field through the county. And when you look at the benchmark communities, the setbacks, the front setback in King and Queen was 100 feet. In Caroline, the front setback was 200 feet in their agriculture preservation district, 150 feet in the rural preservation district. Hanover lot size 10 acres minimum, frontage setback 125 feet, and New Kent lot size 1.5 acres, front setback 75 feet. So 3 out of 4 had greater setbacks than we're proposing. And that's all I have on that.
Okay. Questions, comments, additions?
Madam Chair, normally the meetings I've seen of late, the chair would alternate between differing opinions, but I'm going to take the opportunity to speak largely in support of Mr. Wagner. I want to read just one short thing from the intent of the AC Agricultural Conservation District. The AC District is to encourage continued agricultural and forestal uses and preserve the natural beauty of rural areas of the county where urban services such as sewer and water mains are not planned. At the same time, the AC District is intended to provide for limited residential development for those who choose to live in a rural environment and to protect this development where it occurs. In order to aid in reduction of access points and traffic hazards, again, access points where vehicles are pulling in and out of the roads, traffic hazards where school buses are stopping, wider lots and deeper front areas are required when fronting on major thoroughfares. Without question, a 10-acre minimum is going to have a negative impact on the landowners who will not have the option of dividing into the smaller areas. But it does keep the look and feel of the rural areas that both this most recent survey as well as the one from 2010 have indicated most of the citizens support. And so while I do recognize the changing it to a 10-acre minimum is going to have an impact on folks, the majority of the county seems to prefer that the rural areas be kept rural. I would note also that Hanover has used this successfully to keep the western part of the county rural for quite some time. And Caroline has even larger minimum lot size in their rural areas than we do. So for all those reasons, I continue to support the 10 acres. Whether we can make a compelling case is up to the supervisors to decide. But I still support the 10 acre minimum. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Going step by step, or we going to start?
Well, my thought is everyone, I was going to allow just people to speak up in response with, so Mr. Greenwood, if you would like to,
I'll start too. Like I
that's
said,
great. Good,
I
thank
mean,
you.
it's like I said, I'd rather have gone through and we've done it line by line. But anyway, I'm going to stick with 5 acres as Berkeley Group suggested. And I'll keep wanting to point out, everybody keeps saying this is a majority of what the county wants. It is not a majority of what the county wants. It's 500 people out of 17,000 people that did this survey. It's a lot more than we've ever had to do anything. And of course, it's a lot more than we had the last time, but it is not the majority of the citizens of the county. So until we can get Berkeley Group or some other group or us to do a survey that does 80% of the citizens of the county, I'm not going to put any stock in any of this. So we have to come up with these rules. I'm sticking with the 5 acre lot as Berkeley suggests because it's, and as other people contradicted, it is hard for people to do the banking. And I'm going to bring some people, some bankers in at the next meeting to say that. I mean, y'all keep saying, not, some people keep saying that, oh, it's all made up. It's not made up. It's hard to get a loan for anything over 5 acres. And if we're going to make it hard for the citizens to come into the county, we're just keeping people from coming here. If we don't have any citizens, no wonder the damn taxes keep going up. So I like the ideas about Mr. Wagner says about if we do keep the 5 acre, keep those bigger setbacks. That's a good idea because that way it keeps the rural look, makes it not so far back like you said, so you can have more wiggle room with the design. That's a great idea. And other things that you didn't mention, when we get into other things, we need to do more about the landscaping and commercial when we get to that part. Like I said, that's a big problem. We haven't got that taken care of. And I see another something coming up that doesn't have any landscaping built in. So I'm sticking with the 5 acre lots, but I agree with making the setbacks bigger.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Madam Chair, I appreciate everyone's comments tonight so far. I see a lot of points from both sides. I don't really have a definitive decision on which is the best. I know that there's been a lot of input from the citizens, from both from the surveys and from people speaking out. I know that there's a lot of interest in keeping the rural nature. And honestly, I don't know what the best decision is either way. I think there's a lot of points for both sides to the situation.
Appreciate your frankness. It is not an easy, it's not easy, right? When we've got citizens and people that are impacted by any of the ordinance changes that are being proposed. And that applies to any of these changes. You kind of get to a place, I think, where people are comfortable with things and, change can be, it's different. And generally speaking, I think human nature is not to like change. But it's our responsibility in terms of the ordinance review. So my observation would be, I am still in support of the 10-acre lot size, and here's the reason why. I'm struggling with, and not struggling, what I see, there were 9 items that Berkeley Group, a whole different question than the 46% that we've been talking about. But another question was to ask citizens to prioritize, and there were 9 items that were given to citizens to consider in terms of their priorities. And the number 1 priority was preserving the rural nature of the county. Number 2 was preserve agriculture. So those were overwhelming majorities when you look at the chart, which was public information with the Board of Supervisors information. And the last priority out of the 9 was new homes, was promote new homes. So the part that I'm seeing is that I saw 3 out of 4 stakeholder groups that were opposed to the larger lot sizes. I reviewed the numbers, and it is a majority of those understanding that we're only talking about those that responded to the surveys. We're not talking about 17,000 individuals in the county, but a majority still specified approval of the increase with respect to the surveys that were circulated. And then we have this overwhelming majority that wanted the rural nature, preserve agriculture. And then the last item was to have new homes. And so you have more lots, you have more homes. So I'm still in support based on my review. That's where I stand. So I think for purposes of this evening, I don't know that we need a formal vote, but I do think we move forward with the reflect what the 3 that still support and 2 that don't. And this will be a topic for discussion in the upcoming Board of Supervisors. It's a joint session meeting. Ms. Grant, can you help me with the date on that?
We have one on May 17th and another one on July 19th.
And it's my understanding that on May 17th, the Board of Supervisors we would be reviewing this. Will the Berkeley Group be at that meeting?
They're supposed to be in attendance at both of those meetings.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just a couple of comments.
Yes.
As much as possible, I would like us to come up with recommendations on the choices the Berkeley Group gave us. In this one instance right here, I'm very comfortable in not having a decision, not even necessarily a decision, but even as a whole, we recommended this or recommended that. I'm comfortable with leaving that branch wide open to that meeting. For most of the rest of the issues tonight, I hope we're able to come up with a recommendation.
That makes sense.
One other thing also on the survey, although it was only 500 or 200 or whatever, I've done a lot of surveys and a lot of data analysis, and it was a very large survey. And the majority of those who responded to the survey led me to believe that the mean and the median and all that indicates that there is a very mixed group, both in favor and against the 10 acres. So again, I would not want to extrapolate any definite decision, but the survey was a sound survey. It matched the survey from 10 years ago, and it showed more support, frankly, than I was expecting to see for a 10-acre minimum.
Right, good. I think that's a great observation, and it may be that as we're discussing additional items this evening that we come to the same conclusion with respect to those topics. Did anyone have any additional comments or
I
questions?
would just like to follow up on what Mr. Braden said. A survey, the 520 people that responded is about 10% of the homeowners in the county. 10% response in a survey of this type is considered excellent. I've done lots of public hearings and lots of surveys, all with highways and bridges. But anytime we could get that large a turnout or that larger response, it was excellent. I've had crowds as many as 250 to 500 people come out to public hearings, and you get a large opposition in a case like that. But all in all, the survey results would be considered by any consultant to be excellent.
Thank you. Any others?
Madam Chair, I guess what I would like to point out to our audience and any of those who are listening is that we're still just coming up with recommendations for the draft. This isn't anything finalized. It all has to go to public hearing and decisions have to be made and votes have to be taken then. So anything that we're still discussing tonight is still just from a draft perspective. We just have to put something together in order to go to a public hearing with some type of language as recommendation for the citizens to be able to give their input.
Thank you. And that's a very pertinent point, that this is still a draft. Yes. Ms. Green.
Just real quick, they are planning to have another public, open house in June. I don't have a date yet. And then after that public, house and the comments and everything that they've received from there, they're gonna bring that to the July, work session to try to incorporate any final changes at that work
At
session.
those meetings, can you explain the process? This is where the community would have an opportunity to comment on the,
Ask questions, they're gonna kind of go over everything similar to what they did before, but with the final draft. And then if there's any additional comments that need to be brought before the board and the planning commission, we'll do that at the July 19th meeting, the work session. And then hopefully after that work session, their plan is to have a final draft that will be ready for public hearings.
gotcha. That's helpful. Gives you an idea, level of input and thought that's being put into the process. So, yeah.
One more thing, I guess everybody else has had a second chance. I agree with Don. Like I said, it was a very good survey for the number of people who showed up, but I also work for VDOT and have had several public hearings. Those kind of meetings are in person. They're in a group. They have the people there talking to you. This survey was sent out to the citizens. Half of them didn't know what they were doing. I got lots of complaints back. They didn't know what the questions meant. A lot of people sent in just answered. So nobody was there to help them answer.
Everybody type in the chat, Alex is a stupid
Still,
nigger.
it's not quite the same, but it was a good turnout for us, but still the results I think are tainted because the people didn't understand the questions, and a lot of them were self-serving and oriented at a certain
Obsessed with condoms in my hand. I did half a
That's
Zan, now I'm pounding.
not. And since it wasn't anybody there to help discuss what it was about or issues about what the question actually meant, but I go along with it.
Well, I appreciate the input. I don't think things were tainted. I do think that some questions, I don't know that I think this question were a little bit unclear.
Right.
I definitely would say I drafted them.
Jesus Christ.
Not just, you know, in terms of the survey responses,
That's
the
what we
feedback
like.
on that particular
Lost my
question,
respect.
every single person
Booty
responded.
wet. When I suck
So
the
that
cock,
is
I get
just
wetty
good
with
to
my
show
neck.
you
See
that
the cock that I took.
about it. I would recommend that we move along to the accessory dwelling, and I'm going to ask my colleagues.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
may, before we do we want to make recommendations? They gave us some choices, and they have recommendations on the lot depth, the primary road frontage, and the minimum setbacks. Do we want to make recommendations on those items Mr. Wagner talked about? What we would like to do. I think setbacks from what Berkeley Group recommended. I feel that way as well. So is that something we can make recommendations on?
I would also, and didn't articulate, agree that in the event that it does stay the same, that there is an increase as reflected. There's clearly a lot of thought that's been put into this. My question would be, so
Everybody type in the chat, Alex is a stupid nigger.
there's an increase, but there's also a distinction.
Big
Mr. Wagner,
dick
in
stuck in my
terms
ass,
of
man.
what the minimum lot depth is, lot frontage, and minimum setback is based on whether it's primary, secondary, subdivision,
Panini.
et cetera.
Let me
right?
suck your
So
weenie. Thought
it's
you
not
wanted
just
to
a
do anal,
base
so make sure your booty
number,
cleany.
it's reflecting
Ass
the
so creamy.
nuances of the lots.
Wished it on James Beanie. I got
themselves.
niggas finally wanting them to come
And
inside me.
I would support
I
that
thought you
as
was
well.
homo for life. I've
What numbers
said
are
you
recommending
wanted to see me
to the
squirm.
Board of Supervisors?
You
I'll be
lied.
recommending the numbers
Just
that
say
Mr. Wagner
to
has
me.
provided.
Well, if you can go through specifically the fronting primary road, and then the setbacks for primary and secondary roads, what was Mr. Wagner recommending? Because I thought that he was recommending the road frontage of 400 square feet. The draft has 500, and I think Mr. Wagner was recommending 400. The Berkeley group had some lower number. And the Berkeley group had pointed out some of the other localities' numbers were not as deep as ours. However, they also have much larger lot sizes, 25 acres with Caroline County, which surprised me, 15 or so for another type of agricultural. And then, of course, Hanover has been 10 for close to 2 decades. So again, if we, and so Mr. Wagner, I think it suggested 500 to 400 for fronting primary road. And then I think 100-foot setbacks from the primary and secondary roads. Is that correct, Mr. Wagner?
Oh. What I was recommending was if the final decision is to go with the 5 acres, then we would go with the numbers I have here. If we stay with the 10 acres, if that's what's approved, then we would go with the previous numbers that we had recommended. The only difference I would have in that, in either case, would be on the secondary setback, go to 100 feet.
On both, or on both the 5 or the 10, whichever
Yes,
one.
yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Okay, so do we feel comfortable then, at least with respect to that portion in terms of,
If the rest of the commission is fine, I'm fine too.
okay. Okay, good. So I think we'll be making those recommendations. I do have a question in terms of what this looks like for our joint session with the Board of Supervisors. It's my understanding that we need to have responses back to the Berkeley group by May 4th.
They wanted them by May 3rd.
Okay, so
So
that's,
they could compile everything for the next joint work session.
okay, so we have 3 business days. I think the 3rd is at a Monday. Yeah. So we're going to need to have something to present in terms of that particular item. And so the question is what that looks like and how we do that. And so not sure whether we put something together or staff put something together in terms of the recommendations.
I would recommend we put something together, take a look at it on the 4th at our meeting, and then or prior to, but didn't bring any comments back on the 4th. And if it's good, send it on over to Berkeley.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I could eat at Berkeley on the 3rd.
Well,
I'd like to have it by the 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have an issue with an extra day. I don't think it's going to make us or break us. And we do have our regular meeting scheduled with
That's
only one item on the agenda. So I think once we go through this, having it in some bulleted point or some, executive summary would be helpful for purposes of, so I think that is maybe the way it needs to unfold. So, okay. Okay. Any additional comments or thoughts? Thank you, Mr. Breen, for having us dig into that a little bit deeper. I do think we need to have some resolution on some of these in terms of moving forward. So next item. We've had a lot of these recently. If you all have been attending any of our planning commission meetings, accessory dwellings. And so I'm going to ask my commissioners, would you all like me to read out in its entirety, and I'm fine doing it, the summary provided by the Berkeley Group. I would not do the benchmark communities unless you ask me to. Mr. Greenwood, I want to make sure that you're,
I'm okay
if you have
with
a
everything.
preference, I'm going through.
It doesn't matter. Let's just take more time. I don't know.
Well, it is. I just want to make sure the community hears what they need to hear. Again, all this information has been disseminated and is online, but
That's true. It probably should. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, maybe we should. Just
Okay.
quickly if you can.
so I'm
That
just
would
going
be
to go
good.
through. So
Right.
the accessory dwellings, the
So nobody else
proposed
has seen
changes, and I'm just reciting what the Berkeley Group has summarized as the proposed changes. The overview is defined as smaller independent residential dwelling units located on the same parcel as a single family dwelling, allowed by right in the AC district and as a conditional use permit required for the RR and the R1 districts. The use standards include restrictions on the size based on the location of the accessory structure and may equal the existing finished square footage of the primary dwelling when contained in the primary dwelling. So for instance, a basement, attic, additional level, and shall be no more than half the size of the finished square footage of the primary dwelling when attached to a primary dwelling or located in a detached structure. So the purpose of the proposed changes were to provide affordable housing, slow the division of land, and assist with senior care when there is a need. The public input coming back, I'm going to recite this. I don't know, I can't recite, although we can look into it. The stakeholders identified that this was helpful for the care of the elderly. The survey response that went out to the citizens and came back, 20% encourage accessory dwellings, 43% allow with restrictions, so allow with restrictions, 27 discourage, and 10% had no opinion. I'm going to do other considerations. Communities that have allowed accessory dwelling units despite concern of increased density, changes to neighborhood community, and demand on resources find that the fears are overstated. So this is just, these are just notes from the Berkeley Group. Some localities limit the square footage, but do not base it on the primary dwelling. The average allowed sizes range from 650 to 800 square feet. And the last consideration that the Berkeley Group offered were accessory dwellings can be limited to one parcel, one per parcel, or allowed based on acreage. So one additional unit per acre. So these are additional considerations for the Planning Commission. The recommendation that the Berkeley Group said, in addition to the proposed standards that I just read out, the Berkeley Group recommends adding the following. Only one accessory dwelling is permitted per parcel. A recreational vehicle, travel, trailer, camper, or similar vehicle shall not be used as an accessory dwelling, and an accessory dwelling shall obtain all proper permits and comply with all applicable requirements of the Virginia Department of Health and the Uniform Statewide Building Code. So those are the recommendations made by the Berkeley Group. And so I will open it up for everyone to provide comments. How many, Ms. Graham, did we have at our last meeting? Was it 3 accessory or 2 accessory
We had
dwellings?
2, but you have one coming up on Tuesday.
Yep. And so this is timely for sure. So, thank you. Anyone want to comment on their thoughts on the Berkeley Group recommendations?
First of all, the one thing that's not mentioned in this is a separate dwelling unit. The definition of an accessory dwelling unit means a smaller, independent residential dwelling unit located on the same parcel as a separate single-family dwelling. After looking at this, and after going through a few public hearings for these type facilities, we spend an awful lot of time, staff spends an awful lot of time doing this. It appears to me that instead of having this as a conditional use, that we could allow it by right, tighten up the regulations to where we think they need to be to make sure that we're accomplishing what we want by allowing dwelling units, and then let the zoning administrator review and approve the request. I think that actually would free up the zoning administrator's time a good bit in staff time. And also it would accomplish, there's no reason that couldn't accomplish the same thing. I see no real reason if we spell out what's expected of these units, that I see no reason at all that it can't be handled by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Mr. Breeden, so is the proper way to do this that I ask if anyone opposes that view?
Well, I don't oppose it per se. I was going to look it up just now on the draft, but I think the proposal is to have it be by right in agricultural, isn't it?
It currently is if they have over 50 acres, less than 50 acres. Right now, they have to go through the CDP process.
And this current draft doesn't address the acreage.
I'm
It
not
just
sure.
says in agricultural areas, which can be 5 acres, if that's what it ends up being, they can still do it by right.
So you're correct. The first item in the proposed change, and of course, we've got the ordinance with us as well, is allowed by right in the AC district and with a conditional use permit required in the RR and the R1 districts.
So that's already being proposed, and I fully support that. And if I may, the Berkeley Group had 3 recommendations for that, as you mentioned, and I'm in support of all 3 being added to the to section 86-123. The only one accessory dwelling is allowed per parcel. The second one, a recreational vehicle, travel trailer, so forth and so on, shall not be used, and it shall obtain all proper permits. So I fully support all 3 of the Berkeley Group recommendations, adding those to the draft. And one thing I would also like to do, which the Berkeley Group did not mention, in section 86-125 for family health care structure temporary, I would like to add a section of the code to that, which we do in many other places, specifically Code of Virginia section 15.2-2292.1 at the bottom of that section. The Code of Virginia requires us to have a temporary family health care section in our code. It was confusing to me at first until I delved into it. Really, the people who've been coming before us have not been asking for temporary structures, but rather simply the accessory dwelling units under 1, 2, 3. And that led to some confusion at our last planning commission meeting with a couple of the applications. I'd like to add that section to the 86-125 for temporary family health care structures. And section 86-125 for temporary family structures, where our family structures that are not temporarily addressed, well, that's in the accessory dwelling unit, for which we had 2 last month, and we have 1 or 2 earlier this month and 1 next month. So I'm supporting the Berkeley Group's recommendation of adding 3. I'm supporting the existing allowed by right in agricultural areas and by conditional use permit in these areas, which would largely conform to what we have here, plus any additional requirements that were necessary based on the land where it's being placed. Is it on a 3-acre lot? Is it on a 20-acre lot? So forth and so on. So I'm speaking in support of adding the Berkeley Group recommendations to the draft ordinance, and then also adding that code citation to 86-125. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, I'd like the same thing that he's in.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at Mr. Wagner. Thank you very much. That's a very good idea. I agree with that completely. But I'd like to also add, because we've done the same thing with the Board of Supervisors, Sherry can do this internally. I think she should still give us a list of all those ones she does so that we know what's going on. I think the Board of Supervisors also asked the Treasurer and the Commissioner of Revenue to do that with something that we just gave them power to do. They're still going to give us the report, but it doesn't have to go to the attorney, so that way we don't have all the extra attorney fees involved. This way Sherry can just give it to us at like our monthly meeting. We'll know what's going on, and then we can ask questions if you want just to know information about it. At least like just save her and us a lot of time and not have to have the conditional use permit that costs a lot of money for these people. Yeah, thank you very much.
I fully support the recommendations from Berkeley as well.
Good, thank you. I love the idea of making this an administrative process. So my question is the change, so we've already said allowed by right in the AC district. Are we saying that the CUP would not be required in the RR or the R1 districts either? And it's all part of a,
I think the current draft calls for, I'm getting ready to check right now, it calls for it to be a conditional use permit. And again, in the smaller lot sizes, I think there's a great deal more potential to have an impact on the neighbors that would still warrant a conditional use permit.
okay, so what we're talking about is there would still be a conditional use permit requirement for the smaller lot sizes because you have the neighbors, but the allowed by in the AC district by right. And I'm in support of that. That makes sense to me. Also like the idea of the addressing the temporary structures. I think that needs to be done. And so I'm going to ask the question, one of the things in our last meeting that we discussed was there was an accessory dwelling of a, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 bedrooms that we were discussing, and
They
we,
started with 3 and it was
right.
really 2.
So my question is, I'm currently the way it's drafted is that the accessory dwelling shall be no more than half the size of the finished square footage of the primary dwelling. So if you have a 10,000 foot house, which I don't think many people have, but let's just use for way of example, right? Let's say it's a 5,000 square foot house. Then what that's saying is someone could have 2,500 square feet for an accessory dwelling. So I actually like the recommendation that Berkeley Group has on limiting the size of it. I don't think 650 square feet cuts it. I don't know what you could have in that space. 800 feet, I don't know about. I'm throwing that out because they threw that out as a consideration, but it was not included as one of the per se recommendations that they laid out. So.
Madam Chair, I would support adding an 800 square foot minimum. My first house was only 900 square feet. So I think 800 gives them ample latitude and cuts down on the 2 mansions on one property. So,
which is kind of what we.
In contradiction to the whole concept. Yes.
Right. Okay, so would fellow commissioners be open to adding an additional 800 maximum square foot
Yes.
provision? Okay.
Instead of changing it from ranges from 600, just say starts at 800.
Well, and Mr. Greenwood, that was just the recommendation that we
Right.
could consider. And what I think the chairman is suggesting is that we do just that and add that as one of the
As-
Oh, right.
One of the recommendations that we say, okay, so it's permitted by right in the AC, but you've got these parameters. What do those parameters look like? Okay. The Berkeley Group had 3, which we've all discussed openly. They also had another consideration of the dwelling, maybe other localities limit the square footage. And so I like the idea of 800 square foot. Our first home, which just about bankrupt us up in the days in Alexandria, I think was 650 square feet too. So you all feel comfortable with that as well? Okay, so any other questions or comments?
I'm
Okay.
curious about the acreage size. Do you know what the acreage size was? Just for general knowledge, what were the 2 we had last week? Would they have fallen under that and still had to have the CUP? Or is it
What
25?
were they,
The trailer was not very large at all.
I want to say.
I'm not talking about trailer.
he's
The
talking about the
original
lot
lot
size.
size.
Was it
Lot size?
R and
Wasn't it
R1?
I want
48?
to say one was 10.
10 acres? Okay, so
We had one that was fairly large.
So
and the
one
other
of them would have
one
had to
was-
come and still, okay,
Yeah.
I
One
just
was
was
like 10 or
curious.
15.
It wasn't too big, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're moving forward with our original recommendations, plus the 3 Berkeley recommendations and the additional 800 square foot. Okay, good. So that is one of them that I did think was going to be a little bit more clear cut. The next item is short-term business rental. I'll go through just like I have with the others. The current ordinance does not currently address short-term rentals. The overview of the proposals are the definition of a short term, and I think this is consistent with state code, is a dwelling or portion thereof that's rented for 30 days or less. So it would be different than a longer term lease. It would be allowed by right in the AC district and CUP required in the RR and the R1 district. It includes use standards, so it requires a licensing requirement with the county, limiting the number of adult guests, and providing the county the ability to suspend the license. And I think there were also provisions that permit the county express provisions to collect taxes. The purpose of intent was to address new businesses like Airbnb and VRBO and home away, including the use increases the potential to receive tourist dollars through taxes and direct spending, and standards ensure monitoring and reduce negative impact. So the stakeholders, the comments that came back, and this is just, again, a summary, provides lodging for attendance at weddings and events and may lead to boutique hotels and larger hotels in the future. I don't know if we'll ever have a hotel, but maybe so. And I do think that was pretty consistent with all the stakeholder group. They are in support of business in the county, and so that would be consistent. Survey response that came back from citizens, 14% encourage the use, 30% allow with restriction, 44% discourage use, 12% no opinion. And the comments that came back included concern of crime, a desire to allow them to support events and tourism, and a desire to regulate them. So just so you all know, in the summary that came back from the Berkeley group on each of the questions that was asked, there's a summary of all of the comments that came back with respect to each. And so you'll see comments that are on all spectrums in terms of each of the considerations. Other considerations, and these are other considerations the Berkeley group has wants for consideration. Short-term rentals are quickly becoming a popular use in localities without acknowledgement in the ordinance. The use is not permitted. A lack of addressing it may create an enforcement issue, as well as missed opportunities for tax revenue and tourist dollars. And then the other considerations, some localities require additional requirements, including but not limited to limiting the number of times a unit can be rented a year, limiting the number of times a unit can be rented per week, and requiring the unit be owned or occupied for 60% of the year. So these are just thoughts that the Berkeley group has put out there. And I guess the limitations are things that maybe they've seen in other jurisdictions. The recommendation is from the Berkeley group is to maintain uses proposed in the districts and with the proposed standards. And then the Berkeley group says, alternatively, additional standards may be added if desired. And we went through just some of those. So those deal with a short-term business rental proposals, and we will open it up for comment of the planning commissioners. Any thoughts on the Berkeley group recommendations as they relate to our proposed changes to the draft ordinance?
We had a letter, and I was looking for it. I can't find it now, but from my doctor and his wife.
That's okay.
Live in a subdivision down in the West Point area. They're concerned. One of their next door neighbors had one of these events. I don't recall what it was, probably like a wedding or wedding reception, but there was a lot of noise and so forth. He had opposed it, and ended up his neighbors all turned against him because he opposed it. So his recommendation was that we have this in two categories. What he was recommending was one, a commercial event venue, and the other a private event venue.
So Mr. Wagner, if I may, that actually was a letter that we will be getting to with the event venue. This is on the short-term rental. That's okay. That's okay, because I'm sure that there are facilities that have venues like Seven Springs and I can't remember North Point that have wedding venues and short-term rental opportunities. So it makes sense. I didn't have any comments So,
Madam Chair, we drafted it. I think it's useful to have it in the ordinance. They had no recommended changes. I wouldn't object to additional standards, but I don't see the need for them at this time. So I'm comfortable with the draft ordinance as it's written.
any further comments?
I agree with Mr. Brady.
Okay, well, that was an easy one. Let's move forward then. How many more? We've got another one that's going to probably take us a little time. This one may not, but this actually has generated some interest in the community. This is the event venue, and we do have several event venues in the county. So the description of the proposed change to the ordinance, overview, location that hosts affairs for up to 3 consecutive days, including but not limited to banquets, dinners, parties, and weddings. So these event venues that I just described would be allowed by right in AC or R. The B1 and the B2 districts. Sites that cannot meet use standards may apply for a conditional use permit, and include use standards that, for instance, cap the event at 150 persons maximum, maintain no more than 5 events per calendar year, limit amplified sound, and require parking and setback of structures. The purpose of and intent of the proposed changes to the ordinance with respect to the event venues are becoming a popular use in localities. Addressing it in the ordinance creates opportunity for tourist dollars and supports small business. Standards ensure there is minimal or no negative impact. All right, so stakeholders promote and encourage agritourism, wedding venues, festivals, a day length, and historic reenactments. Survey response from the citizens: 37% support the event venue and the draft ordinance as drafted, 40% allow with restriction, 16% discourage, and 7% no opinion. Other considerations raised by the Berkeley Group. Event venues are one way that some localities build upon agritourism and create opportunity for new uses on farm and rural lands. And additional requirements can be added, such as a permit approved by the zoning administrator 30 days prior to the event. 2 events may be approved simultaneously if deemed to be same in nature and size. Another one is limiting the hours of the event, requiring private trash collection. So these are other considerations. The recommendation is use standards were drafted upon PC input and may be adjusted. Reduce number of persons in attendance, change time requirements. Alternatively, the use could be edited to require a conditional use permit in the AC, RR, B1, and B2 districts and remove the use standards to address each impact on a case-by-case basis. So I can't really tell what the recommendation is there. It seems like the recommendation is they were drafted based on PC input and their alternatives that are available. So I don't know that they're saying don't do what you've proposed, but here's some additional considerations. Mr. Wagner, this is what that letter that you were talking about,
Yes.
if you want to speak to that now.
Yeah, event venues can occur in, well, let me go back. We have a lot of event venues in this county that are operating right now. They are on large acreage. In Malvern Hill along Route 600 next to the Carolina County line. There's another one on Route 604 right off Route 600. The Seven Springs and several more around the county. They're large event venues that offer events and different things, weddings, whatever, year-round. And first place, I don't think those should be restricted. I think that's a business and they should be allowed to operate the way they are. The other situation is smaller events, like wedding reception, wedding, whatever, in somebody's backyard. I think that should be treated differently. The larger event venues, which what we say in here now is allow up to 150 people on some of those large event venues. We could leave the 150 people in there, but somehow allow the zoning administrator to make a decision on that based on what is occurring and what protections the provider will provide for the public, for noise, traffic, and so forth. I think we've got to allow that differently than from the smaller events. The smaller events, we need to look a little closer at those, but I think we can. It becomes a little difficult. What are these? Are these by right or are these by? I have it in front of me right now. By conditional use.
Allowed by right in the AC.
By right in the AC. And in by conditional use in the R1. So if you're by right in the AC and by right in the B1 and B2.
Right.
And the R is what it says.
Right, or B1 and B2 allowed CP.
Where it's a year-round venue type, and I think that needs to be treated entirely different from somebody that wants to have 1 or 2 times a year some pig roast in the backyard or a wedding or something like that. And in all cases, I think the planning office and the Commissioner of Revenue's office both should be notified at least 2 weeks prior to the event, so that the Commissioner of Revenue's office has a responsibility for taxation and other issues. The planning district, the zoning administrator's office has a responsibility for making sure it's going to be something that's not going to get out of hand. The other thing that should be notified is the sheriff's office, so that the sheriff's office and the planning office can look at what's coming up and what protection the sheriff's office may need to provide, or at least that the sheriff's office is aware that such an event is going on. And then, of course, we need to look at noise from some of these, particularly if they're close to other homes and hours that we would allow them.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, please.
I feel very strongly that it should be by conditional use permit in both agricultural and rural residential for the following reasons. If I have a 250-foot wide lot and I have neighbors 50 feet from my house and I have 5 or 10 events every year that go on for large amounts of time, the current conditions are not sufficient to protect my neighbor's interests. So again, if all of our lots were nice and square and 10 and 20 acres, I would have no problems at all with having it in the agricultural areas. But there are a lot of fairly narrow lots, and having multiple commercial events in an agricultural area is not agritourism per se. A 50-acre winery and having events there, the neighbors aren't even aware of it. But just a wedding venue, and Seven Springs is a good example. The neighbors don't even know anything's going on because the property is so large and so forth and so on. But to have individuals hosting commercial events without more careful consideration of the impact on the neighbors is something that I think, for the time being, I would ask that we change those to be conditional use permits, so that the zoning and the planning can hear what they're proposing. And it may be entirely appropriate, and we could support it, or it could be something that the neighbors would want to speak out against and say, we love Joe, we love John, he's a great guy, but we don't want a wedding 50 feet from our house.
May I ask just a point of clarification? Because I can't find it in the 200.
It's on page 102 of the electronic version. It's in the use matrix.
Okay.
And it's event venue, and it's listed currently in the draft as by right.
What's the section, if you have it, by Mr. Breen?
It's in the use matrix, which I believe is 86-120.
Thank you. I couldn't remember. So are we talking about conditional use permit is a private,
Well, no. I mean,
is an event
I mean,
venue,
Well, I mean, private parties, we can have private parties on our property anytime in the county. What this is addressing are commercial paid events.
okay.
Not private parties. My son's graduating from college next year and I want to invite 50 people and I'll try to keep it quiet because I care about my neighbors, but it's a private party.
So I was just trying to clarify, is the distinction then in the definitions of the ordinance?
Well, the definition is event venue. My house is not an event venue.
Okay. Well, I was just trying.
Unless I choose to have people come to my house and pay me to have weddings there or graduations there or mud bogs or whatever. So at that point, my house will become an event venue. At that point, it's commercial, it's not private. And that's what I'm suggesting we change to a conditional use permit in the AC and the RR unless or until we add additional conditions that would protect the neighbors, especially when they're fairly narrow lots and houses are close together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I was just wondering, this is the way we have it now?
Well, currently, I think the way the proposed change is to allow by right in the ACRR B1 and the B2 districts. And what Mr. Breeden is, and that sites that don't comply or aren't by right, that you would have to apply for CUP. And I understand what Mr. Breeden is proposing is that all event venues would come under a CUP.
That's what I'm saying. In our
Right.
current, we don't allow it
Oh.
at all.
Oh.
So that's what I'm saying. We're changing it.
In-
We allow it.
In agriculture and RR, not in business
Okay.
districts,
Oh, okay.
which could still be by right.
And like you said, I'm glad he clarified that too, because I was thinking if anybody wants to do something on their own property, they can do whatever they want. But this is just like you said, if John, after he has his one for his son, and you decide, oh, this is great, I'm going to start. Right.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right.
Right, I needed that clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because a paid event versus a personal
Right.
event, if we got into limiting personal events by conditional
Mhm.
use permit, our staff would never be able to handle the volume that would be coming in, so.
Plus the citizens.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
I
Right.
want a clarification. The large event venues like Seven Springs and others of that nature. This would be a one-time conditional use permit.
Oh.
Should
that
be,
correct?
yes.
We all agree with
okay.
that?
Yes.
Okay, and then,
Oh, so that's good
but
too.
require, well, in the
Yeah.
conditional use
Each
permit,
time.
you could require notifications.
Right.
That type of thing.
Thanks for clarifying that too, because that would be pretty expensive each time.
Yeah.
So when they start up, or if they haven't done one, they would go ahead and get one first time and then be good. Okay.
The only thing is they would have to notify the planning.
Right, when one is.
Office.
That sounds good, yeah.
That makes sense to me, to have it. I mean, and that would be the case unless we drafted otherwise, right? That a conditional use permit is a one-time kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Now, I'm just curious, would that be like going forward, or is that like, are we backtracking to event venues that we already have, like Seven Springs, or?
I don't know that we address it in our,
I mean, that would just basically going forward?
right.
Usually grandfather, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
usually
you're a
grandfather.
lawyer.
Well, I think that it typically is. I will say though, on the short-term rentals, and so maybe this just needs to be a point of clarification with the Berkeley Group is
Or the
that
attorney.
there was a provision, yes, that specified that people who currently operate short-term rentals are not subject to, and that was pulled from the Berkeley Group ordinance as it was drafted, and I don't think that is here. So if we can make that a point of clarification in terms of how that impacts our existing event venues.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
is-
please.
Would it be appropriate if we asked Mrs. Graham if she had any other input or thoughts about what we've discussed?
Yeah, I think so. You mean with respect to this item or, okay, yes.
I think you're right. I think the existing ones are grandfathered. I think it's, and we've really not had any issues with any of these places but one.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
If I may, your opinion about doing them by conditional use permit, you think that's appropriate?
For these large facilities, yeah. For a couple of reasons. It can bring a lot of people to a location. And once they notify, and this is any event that they have to get a special permit now. We work it with the sheriff's office. We always notify the sheriff's office when the event is going to be, what it's going to be. If they're lacking restroom facilities, they have to provide those. Multiple things, so.
Thank you, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Madam Chair, no, but who was it that came up with the about right for the AC? Was that Berkeley Group, since this is all new, or was that in some county's codes?
No, I think the overview, the description of the proposed changes are what are currently,
Oh, so
yes.
okay.
And, now here we've gotten feedback since this time
Right.
from the surveys. We've gotten feedback from the stakeholders. Now we've got Berkeley recommendations and letters and comments. So,
That's why we didn't check them when we went through all this the first time.
well, and we kind of knew going through this that there were going to be adjustments, certainly. So I agree with the comments that have been made and support them.
So we're just gonna strike that about right now. All of them are gonna be conditional use permit.
But in the AC and RR, in the business districts, I have no problem with it. There's already business going on potentially,
Right.
so.
That's true.
Right. So does that make sense to everybody? Is that conditional use permit it's allowed by right in the business districts and then conditional use permits in all other districts? Okay, good. I think we're good. Yeah.
But not R1. We're just gonna do AC and RR.
I don't think,
Just AC and RR
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it wouldn't be in Kennington or
right.
the R1, it's not allowed.
No, it's not permitted. It's not in the use table. Okay.
Take it over there.
Okay. Thank you all for your comments on that. I think that is something that we can write up as well. We've got two more items, everyone. Site plans required during rezoning. We're going to discuss that next, and then family subdivisions. Okay. So I'm going to read out the site plan. This kind of like the lot sizes was something that got varying opinions and people felt strongly about. So I'm going to go through the description of the proposed ordinance change and overview. That site plans must be submitted for the Planning Commission and board approval and applications that request a zoning change or a conditional use permit. So it'd be zoning change or conditional use permit. The plans would require inclusion of locations of existing and proposed features, including lot lines, buildings, streets, driveways, loading, parking, storm sewer, landscaping, size and height of fencing, etc. The purpose of an intent of the proposed change was to provide the Planning Commission and the board with insight into the request for informed decision-making when either approving or not approving requested rezonings, to have this information and understand community impact and compatibility with the community. The stakeholders came back, I think it was 3 out of the groups said requiring site plans with rezoning applications was not supported, not business friendly, land needs to be rezoned for marketing to businesses, and details are not always known in the preliminary phase. The survey response, so that was the stakeholders that I just read. The survey response from the citizens, 64% said it was very important to require site plans. 19% said it's important to require. 10% said somewhat important to require, and 6% said it's not important to require site plans. Other considerations. This is the Berkeley Group. Other considerations: to ease cost burden during the rezoning application process, localities commonly accept concept plans, also referred to as general development plans or preliminary site plans. Concept plans are less detailed than site plans and show general locations for utilities and improvements. They do not typically include detailed engineering calculations and allow flexibility for changes in use and final design. The final site plan would be based on the concept plan with a level of conformance proffered during the rezoning process. So then the recommendation from the Berkeley Group is to require concept plans, which we just described, during rezoning applications with generalized locations and fewer submittal requirements. So the concept plan would be something less than a full-blown site plan based on the Berkeley Group recommendation. So that's kind of a summary of the site plan feedback that we've gotten, and I will open it up for discussion with the Planning Commission.
Go ahead.
I think what at the board meeting, at our joint meeting, what did Berkeley take away from that they were going to do with the site plans? They were going to look at some options and come back to us.
I don't remember on that.
Thank you. They were actually.
I thought we had
is,
asked
right.
them to do just that. That was the only task.
That's where
we
this
had for
came
them.
from.
Yeah,
They came up with the idea about concept plans, and we said we wanted more information.
yeah,
So
and which
they
I
didn't have this
said,
to begin with.
And we asked them to put
That-
together a
that's
proposal
right.
for us. That was
Exactly.
Yes.
the only thing we asked them to do.
Right.
yes. So we are waiting for feedback. I think the consensus was at that time, okay, thank you, send us proposed revisions. So we need to follow up on that. Is there any further discussion that commissioners would like prior to getting that feedback?
The one thing I would share, and Mr. Wagner and the others, y'all can disagree with me, when if we have not updated the future land use map in over a decade and a half. And so there are some parcels that are probably not zoned the way they should be. And so people are having to do rezonings, and I'm looking forward to having an up-to-date future land use map that the citizens, the supervisors, and everyone is in agreement with. After that, if someone wants to do a rezoning, it's totally changing what the citizens, the supervisors, and everybody has come up with, and it may be a good thing. And I think it warrants some sort of a here's what we want to do, that we could then proffer in to say, well, yeah, you're proposing to do such and such, and there would be a preliminary site plan, a concept plan, something along those lines that a lot of localities have for rezoning that I think are absolutely appropriate. But an actual site plan can cost tens of thousands of dollars or more. And if you don't have a specific, if you have an idea of something that would be good for the county and a good use of the land, a concept plan of some sort is certainly warranted. But a full-blown site plan that costs a lot of money, then you then have to go and get reapproved, I don't think is necessarily necessary. So I'm looking forward to what the Berkeley Group comes back with, that I hope will meet the needs of the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, and the citizenry. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any further
Madam
comment?
Chair, if I may, it's evident that the citizens that responded to the survey, it was an overwhelming response. The citizens want to know what's going to happen. I think the citizens need to know what's going to happen. So when we have a rezoning from AC to B1 or whatever type of rezoning it is, I do think we need to be able to, I'm in agreement with the concept plan, and I want to see what that's going to look like. But I think we as a planning commission, in order to be able to manage the development in the county, in accordance with our comprehensive plan, need to be able to require proffers. If they're proposing something and it requires a certain type of entrance or parking or whatever, then we need to be able to require proffers to confirm that's going to happen. If somebody comes back with another developer comes back and wants to do it differently, then we'd have to go through that process again. But whatever, if that's what is approved, in the rezoning, based on a concept plan, then we need, at that time, we need to be able to go ahead and require proffers to be certain that it's going to be developed.
Well, I think that's part of the process,
Well,
in the rezoning.
We can't
If you
require
do-
proffers
Yeah,
anymore.
if you're
Well, I
doing,
know it's not, I understand, not proffers. Right.
So we shouldn't even say that. So
Yeah.
that's gonna get us into trouble.
Yeah, I understand.
No. Don't misunderstand what proffers are. I'm not talking about money.
No.
What I'm talking about is if they're requiring certain kind of development and they are showing, depends on the size of the development a whole lot, but traffic is an issue. And we should be able to we should be able to get a traffic impact analysis and determine what is required for traffic and be able to require proffers for that.
If I may, Madam Chair, Mr. Wagner is entirely correct. The proffer system has been grossly abused by a number of localities in the Commonwealth, not including King William County. However, the General Assembly has modified things to cut down that level of abuse. That said, the proffers he's proposing are entirely appropriate because it puts an added impact on the community they're proposing. And if we don't think it's in the best interest of the county, we should not recommend approval. In addition to proffers he is mentioning, we also can and should include that they proffer what they say they're going to do on the preliminary site plan.
Right, and I would say it's just a matter of nomenclature. Proffer we're talking about conditions to the rezonings, which we do all the time. So it's, the proffer word is a very bad word, but that's not what we're talking about here. My thought is, I think what you're saying, Mr. Wagner, is you're on board with the thought and, but that there needs to be a level of certainty. And I think the process contemplates exactly what you've addressed. I would be interested. I don't know that I can really comment on what is sufficient in terms of the concept plan until we see the language. That's where I am with it. Ms. Height, do you have comments? And then I'd like to get Ms. Graham's input as well.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yes.
That I like.
well, you were talking about proffers.
Yeah.
We can't require proffers.
Right.
But another thing, when you look at something for rezoning, and I'm just going to use this as an example, you have a piece of property on 360 and it is zoned AC, and somebody comes in and they want to zone it for B2, and you're requiring that they give you a conceptual plan to put a drugstore there. Well, you're going to zone it B2. The drugstore doesn't go in. A year or two down the road, they sell it to somebody else. Somebody else comes in and puts in a Dollar General store because it's zoned to B2.
In other words, it just a rezoning approval with nothing other than that would allow any use permitted under that category.
And then what?
Right, I
And what
understand.
happens when they come in to actually build, then they submit the full-fledged site plan, traffic study for VDOT, and that would determine what kind of entrance they need.
And that site plan process at that point is administrative.
It is,
Yes, and so the planning commission would not see it, nor would the board of directors.
not
Okay.
unless they want to do so.
Right, I guess you could incorporate conditions onto that, but I don't know how you couldn't really do that. So I think the process, I think we've got more information coming. What has the Berkeley Group given you any indication of when we can see that language? Because that discussion was on April 12th.
I will contact Rebecca.
If you don't mind, that would be great. It would actually be really nice to, not that any of us are going to have time to review it before our next meeting. No.
Yeah.
But if they can have it by the meeting, since we've got to have ours in 3 business days, that would be
If they
helpful.
can get it to us right away, we will make sure that y'all get it.
We're just on a time crunch,
Yes.
and we gotta, in order for us to make informed decisions, we need the information. So that would be helpful, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. As Mr. Breeden said, like I said, since we don't have the comp plan ever, the sort of general overall idea we always said was the 360-30 corridor, but that never, like we said, got developed. And then it's kind of morphed into, well, the areas that are on 360 or 30 that have the internet or have gas or have utilities. But we really didn't say that yet either. But that's where people go. And like the EDA and the Board of Supervisors were needing, well, we want to have places, I guess, maybe Mr. Breen too, that are already set up, because that's why we don't get people to come here, businesses. And some of these places, like I said, all along 360 are, like Ms. Graham said, not zoned properly to begin with. And if we had done that, or if we get that done eventually, then there won't be these issues.
That's right.
But like I said, as of now, it does, as Mr. Reed said, it's been very expensive for someone to go in and know exactly. They may have a general idea, like Ms. Graham said, they might want a drugstore. We need a drugstore, and they think they want to have one, and so they try to get that ready. But they have to go through, they have to have a full-blown site plan for some imaginary drugstore that they don't even have.
We're not, yeah, we're
Right.
not talking about a full.
Oh, right.
Site plan. We're talking.
Yeah.
about
Right
concept
now,
plan,
right,
which is
right
like a
now, that's what I said,
preliminary
but
site
in the beginning, we were talking about
Yes, we
that
were.
site plan. So
That's right.
now, I think when the board, both boards got together, it was changed into this. But like I said, I want to see more details of how this develops and more telling us specifics of what we need.
What it looks like.
Right.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
that would be good, so that way they don't have to go to so much trouble, and then we have, until we get the final
Yeah.
comp plan.
And the comp plan is a
Mhm.
critical component of this discussion, which is
Exactly.
going to heat up and people will be hearing about if you haven't already. Okay, any other comments on that? We've got more coming. Okay, thank you. The last item, I believe that the Berkeley Group had a comment on were the family subdivisions. The description of the proposed change, immediate family members legally defined as offspring, spouse, grandchild, grandparent, sibling, or parent may gift a parcel of land. So that's no change from the existing ordinance. In the AC district, the minimum lot size for the family gift is 3 acres. In other districts, the minimum lot size of the district applies. So the proposed change was from 5 acres in the AC district. So let me get this straight. So we said 3 acres to 5 acres. Is that where we were?
No.
Is that,
Uh-oh.
okay,
Currently, it's 5 in the AC. I think they were talking about going to 3.
okay. So it's a decrease in the ordinance that okay. I'm getting tired, sorry. Before gifting the land must be owned for a minimum of 5 consecutive years, and after transferring it must remain with the recipient for a minimum of 3 consecutive years. Originally proposed with increased years of ownership after the initial public input PC returned to existing ordinance requirements. Okay, now I'm remembering, because there was a lot of feedback on that. The purpose and intent is to, it's addressed by the state code and utilized to prevent circumvention of the subdivision requirements for major subdivisions, but not limited to road construction requirements. Stakeholders said that the current requirements seem appropriate. Family subdivisions have not been utilized much, and would support lowering timeframes. The survey response, 52% appropriate lot size, 20% said too large of a lot size, 20% said too small of a lot size, and 8% no opinion on lot size. So 52 said appropriate lot size. And then on the time requirements, 51% of the surveyors surveyed came back appropriate time requirements. 24% said too long, 14% too short, and 11% said no opinion on the time. So let's get to other considerations by the Berkeley Group. This time, the time requirement when utilized needs to be tracked and appropriate records maintained to ensure compliance with ownership. That makes sense. And the family may be, the family may be expanded to include aunts, uncles, nieces, or remember this too, and nephews. So the recommendation of the Berkeley Group was to maintain the requirements as drafted. And so there was some back and forth and discussion. I think we were discussing this over a year ago originally, after the public input. So that kind of sets the stage for commissioner comments. Anyone have anything additional to add from the Berkeley Group recommendation or changes?
I'll go first this time.
Yep.
And I was going to ask you about aunts, uncles, nephews, and nieces, because I remember we talking about it, and then I didn't look back at the on the back side where they said that. I think we should put that in there because when we had the public comment period, people were using it for that function, and I think still the 3 acres is too large, which we had the public comment period. A lot of people, the ones we had coming up to us were 1, 2. I think I'd like to see 2, if not less. And I see in the back some of these other counties have 1.5. Some are 2, but like I said, that's up to the board. But I would suggest to be even less than that. So those are the only 2 things I saw that popped out.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Greenwood. Other comments?
I would support adding the nieces and nephews as well. There are more and more families that don't have children, and nieces and nephews sometimes help take care of their aunts and uncles. And so I would support adding nieces and nephews. I'm not sure aunts and uncles I could support, but nieces and nephews that definitely could. I'm comfortable with the existing sizes and the existing ordinance. Earlier in the process, we had proposed increasing the length of time and the lot size, and those changes have been gone back to where we are in the current ordinance.
Yes, that's
So-
correct.
So I'm comfortable with lot sizes. If the commission as a whole wants to recommend a smaller lot size to the board, I could get on board with that, but I think the current lot size is appropriate. Thank you.
I'm good with the current lot size, is what the Berkeley group has proposed. I'm also good with the acreage of aunts and uncles, nephews, nieces, or whatever.
Okay, Ms. White?
I'm okay with the current lot sizes, and I support doing the additional family members to be included.
Okay, so I'm okay with having the existing ordinance as drafted as well. I tend to agree with Mr. Breen. If we're going to expand the current ordinance to include additional family members, I'd be more in support of the nieces and nephews, who, as you mentioned, there could be a circumstance certainly where that would be appropriate. So I guess the question is there a consensus in what we're going forward with the? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. So if we could write that up, and I think, the question just becomes, I think we're going to be parsing it out during the work session, exactly what the expansion looks like in terms of additional family members. That'll be part of the discussion, probably.
And make sure that it's not unanimous, because I don't agree with that, and a lot of people in the audience didn't agree with that. So what does that mean? Point of clarification. If it's anybody wants under 3 acres, which all the ones we have been, they have to get a conditional use permit or an
No.
exception?
No.
What
Mm-mm.
does it mean? They can't do it.
Right.
Well, that,
Right.
I don't like that. Okay.
And if I can, for everyone in the room and who might be on the audience, tonight's purpose, from my perspective, correct me if you're wrong, was the Berkeley group came to the board and the planning commission jointly meeting with recommendations that we could have gone over that night. However, we had not had much time to look at them, and I wanted us as a planning commission to make recommendations where we could going forward. There will be lots of other opportunities. You will have at least 2 public hearings, one with the planning commission and one with the board of supervisors to voice your opinion, and things can still change further. So Mr. Greenwood, I think you may end up getting what you're looking for, and I'm okay with that if that's what the citizens of the county want to have. So you'll have at least 2 more public hearings in addition to the 1 or more open houses as well. So again, what we're doing tonight is nothing is final, but we're hopefully getting closer to what the citizens of the county would like to do as a whole.
Okay.
And no one's going to be in total agreement with what we do. Mr. Greenwood and I disagree. Mr. Wagner and I disagree. Mrs. Height doesn't think any of us have a clue what we're doing.
No, actually, I agree with you. I support what they've written, but I would certainly not rule out decreasing that size.
But you
I
all
would
have, so
certainly be
there's at least
okay.
2 voices for decreasing the size on the planning commission, and then the board will make recommendations. But again, none of this is final. We're just hopefully fine tuning and improving it somewhat based on the Berkeley recommendations in our discussion tonight.
Right.
And I
That's right.
agree with Mr.
It's-
Green. and everybody.
yes.
We all agree to disagree, as we
Yes.
said in our
Yes.
talking between
And-
ourselves, and that's part of it. If we didn't, we would just be all complacent.
And
We'd be
again,
like,
it's going to,
Right.
I think, in terms of our additional work sessions and then these public, forum opportunities for the communities, these things can change. And
Mhm.
so we have not had this is the first time that we have had an opportunity to review the Berkeley group. And I think we've done a pretty good job
Oh,
of
yes.
digging into it.
Right. And like I said, I was just going for that way from what I brought from the public comment period, that one that we did have, which got kind of out of rule. But
Right,
then
right.
I've seen that from what I've seen in public too,
Right.
talking
So-
to people. But like I said, it can all change, and we could decide today to change it, and then tomorrow it could be different.
Yeah.
And the next day it could go back. So
Yeah.
I
I
agree.
think
I'm not-
part of this exercise is identifying the areas
Mhm.
that there's synergies. And then those areas where there aren't, recognize it and, and be flexible in terms of what a change may look like. So I think that we've done as well as a job that we could have based on the amount of information and the amount of time we've had to review it. So I
Right.
appreciate everyone's comments this evening. I don't think that there are any other additional Berkeley group comments that we need to review this evening. We do have our upcoming meeting. Ms. Graham, we have a couple follow-up items with the Berkeley group. And so are there any additional questions or comments from the Planning Commission that you all would like to raise we haven't covered? Okay, good. All right, any closing comments for folks? Mr. Green, you have anything to say?
I'd like to thank folks for coming out. This is an ongoing process. I hope this is the last time we completely revise the zoning and subdivision ordinance in my lifetime. There will be tweaks in coming years and months, and we still have a few more tweaks to go. But I thank you all for your interest, and I would encourage you to reach out to us individually. And when we have public comment periods, as we will at our next planning commission meeting, feel free to speak out on the zoning ordinance or the comp plan, anything that you would like to share with us, we're here for you. So we serve you all. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank staff for the fine job you continue to do, being shorthanded as you are. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Wagner?
I certainly thank all the crowd for coming out. I know there's a lot of interest in what's going on, and folks don't agree with us. A lot of folks don't agree with us, and some do agree with us. We've got to take all this into consideration and do the best we can for the county, not for any particular individuals or whatever. The zoning process has been around for years. The zoning process has a purpose, and that purpose is to protect your neighbor, basically. So that's what we're working toward. That's what we're trying to get to. We're listening to all comments, and we want to have something that will work for everybody, but some of you will walk away from here and still won't be satisfied. And, it's, if we change directions, there'd be another group that won't be satisfied. So, we've got to deal with the facts and the best information we can get, and what's really best for the county and what's best in overall zoning practices.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thanks everyone for coming. Mr. Breeden was well said and everything that he articulated. Thank you all for being a part of this. We do want your continued input. We encourage you to come to all the meetings and speak out at any point to continue to provide feedback. We do want whatever the outcome of this is to be in the best interest of all the citizens. So again, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to the Planning Commission members who have put the research in and had good discussions tonight. And thanks to the staff as well for everything that you did.
Vice Chair, Mr. Greenwood.
I just want to thank everybody for coming too. It was a nice large crowd for us once. We had quite a few people on Zoom, and that's what I wanted to bring up too. hopefully moving forward, we will be able to meet in public. I think we can get more done in public, as Ms. Rose and I were talking earlier. It's just easier to talk in public. It's kind of hard with Zoom. You don't know who's talking. People talk over each other. But at least this way now, we have a way for people to see us that might not be able to come in person. So that would be good. I think we should still continue to do this since we spent all this money on this, and people can do both ways.
Right.
And as Mr. Breeden says, which I have been on as the whole 11 years I've been on the Board of Supervisors, we have been, and Mr. Wagner as well, we've been trying to get the comp plan and all these plans done for years and years and years. So hopefully, cross our fingers, we can get it done soon. And as Mr. Breeden says, it is a living document. And once we finally get it done, it's never going to be the same. And that's good. At least we'll have an outline, and it's shrunk down from what it was. I mean, you all remember 250 some pages. It was ridiculous. Too much extra stuff. Now that we've got the definitions, and once it may not have been the right order, but once we get it all done, it should all work together. And it can be changed because it's a living document, but then at least we'll only have to update a few things. We can maybe just tweak some things, change some things that we found that are not quite right. So I recommend, commend staff, because like I said, we're short staffed. This is our planning commission. I mean, planning department. We only have 2.
Yeah.
This is it. Everybody else has been pardoned off to everywhere else.
Yeah.
One person's gone to finance and the operations. Everybody else has gone off. So thank you. You ladies
Yeah.
have done a wonderful job. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my fellow planning commission. And like I said, I may argue, get a little loud, Mr. Wagner, we agree to disagree, and as always, but it's not meant to be hard feelings. So
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you very much. I don't have much to add other than thank you everyone for coming. We hope you all do attend these open forum discussions. We've been working on this for, is it 2 years? It's 2 years. So we spent a year in work sessions drafting this. So this has been a very thoughtful process, and the thought that we are coming and nearing some type of conclusion is a very satisfying feeling, but we look forward to hearing more from you all. Thank you, staff. We're so grateful. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for doing that.
We needed to, though. I feel like